you heard from my father, we believe in this area behind me is where the action for Rives Salient took place. I want to share with you an excerpt from the novel written by Alice Blaine Trulock entitled In the Hands of Providence, as she depicts the very action that went on here. Quote, Sergeant Patrick DeLacy lay on the grass just behind the ridge with the rest of the 143rd. They were at the brigade right, and not a yard separated him from the cluster of officers and the triangular flag that marked brigade headquarters, such as it was. Their new commander, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, was talking with his staff officers about charging the red line. The day was overcast and hot, and DeLacy was not so near he could not help eavesdropping a little. The colonel asked the officers for a drink of water. Colonel, here's a drink, said DeLacy, slipping the string of his canteen over his head and handing the container over to Chamberlain. Keep it, thank you, replied the brigade commander. I would not take a drink from an enlisted man going into battle. You may need it. My officers can get me a drink. At first, DeLacy was offended at this refusal, but as he thought longer about it, he came to the conclusion that the colonel really meant what he said and was only showing consideration for him. Anyway, the sergeant's leg still hurt, and this day was far from over. The seasoned soldier had taken a look at the enemy works and knew there was real trouble ahead. Now I'm going to share with you more words that were written by my ancestor, and this is from the Scranton Times in 1912. It comes from an excerpt from the letter Patrick DeLacy wrote at the request of Joshua Chamberlain describing the fight before Petersburg. Quote, I ran into a little clear spot of stony ground near where he fell, not 15 feet square, and there lay 11 men, all badly wounded, who when they saw me called, for God's sake, to come and help them to straighten out their arms or legs or put them in some other position. Some had fallen so they could not get their canteens. Others had fallen on their crushed and mangled limbs. I did the best I could for the boys for a few minutes and relieved them to some extent. The water in my canteen that you refused, I divided with them while encouraging them all I could by assuring them that they would be gotten off soon. The bullets of the enemy were striking around and about them all the time. I rushed on up the field towards the top of the ridge, and I thought my head was blown off. Passed directly over me. The next moment I heard the command, "Number 2, fire." I dropped to the ground as the shell passed over me. I jumped up and ran towards the gunner. In less than half a minute, I heard again, "Number 1, fire." And again I dropped, after which I jumped up and ran again toward the gun. But again came the order, "Fire," and down I went again. After this discharge, I reached the side of the gun. It was so dark and smoky I could distinguish nothing but the fire from the guns. In that way, I got through the battle. The officer in charge of one of the batteries asked me where I came from. I told him to be careful, as the remnant of Chamberlain's brigade was in his front, and that some of the Union guns were bursting shells in our line, killing and wounding many, and that I had come back for orders. I stepped back a short distance to the real slope of the ridge and inquired where division headquarters was located. A staff officer came to me and inquired what I wanted. I answered I wanted to find General Griffin, as I could not find brigade headquarters since Colonel Chamberlain fell, and I had been sent back to Colonel Glenn for orders from either brigade or division headquarters or command.